haven't made a video in a while. This is just going to be wrapping up some important topics, some of the most important topics that I haven't really covered a whole lot in the past. It's also going to be kind of rambling and long form. Apparently, people watch Joe Rogan for hours, so sorry if this isn't as concise as I'd like it to be. The first topic, which I should put last, but I'll put it first because it's the most important. Most people spend their lives chasing status and money and power, ultimately power. And it takes a lot of time, and I've done a lot of videos about money in the past and investing, but I think the most important thing to recognize is kind of why people chase this and when it's not really effective and not in your best interest to chase money and power so much. When you go out there and you look at the way people are brought up, the school system is going to teach you just work really hard, compete a lot, and you'll get a job one day and you'll be able to get by. And then if you go online, the top people are going to tell you work even harder and don't work for other people, work for yourself, which is probably correct in many cases. At least then you're getting the most benefit from your effort. But work super hard. Don't worry too much about ethics, because almost none of these people that are talking about the grinded out mindset and how to become rich, they often aren't very ethical people. And just work super hard. And when you work hard like this, the reason everybody tells you to do so is that your effort gets siphoned off to other people. At least when you're working for yourself, less of your effort gets siphoned off to other people. But that's why the whole system is set up this way. I did a video a long time ago, 20 years ago almost, about how even the way we raise children kind of breaks down the parent-child bond so that the child never really feels a very close sense of belonging, and they're constantly striving for this status and this power so that people will pay attention to them. Our whole society is set up this way. And that's all we do, is run around trying to get status and power so that someone will pay attention to us, because people feel somewhat empty or lonely. And if you can kind of short circuit that whole thing, you'll save yourself a lot of trouble. I'm not saying you shouldn't have money or power or anything. I'm just saying that it's not optimal the way we search for this. So again, the basic reason that we do this is just a sense of loneliness and a desperate desire to have people pay attention to us, have validation, feel important. And if we didn't have that emptiness, we wouldn't waste so much time and make ourselves so miserable chasing these things and cause problems for other people when we do it unethically, which is often the case. So how do you get this sense of connection with others? A few different ways, and I'm not an expert on this. I hate doing some of these videos because I feel very hypocritical. All I can say is that I've made progress and a little more aware of what's going on maybe than other people. Not that I'm any expert. Some basic books. There's a book called The Mastery of Love by Don Miguel Ruiz. The Art of Happiness by the Dalai Lama talks about the general theory of forming connection with others. Those are two really good books. There's courses and things like Landmark Forum, which if you take it, you'll hate me because it's really difficult and intense, but it deals a lot with the sense of connection that we have and teaching how people spend so much time just seeking attention and how much time we waste doing this. But ultimately, I feel that the main thing you can do to overcome a sense of loneliness is finally face it. Most people spend their lives running from loneliness, running from this lack of connection. They don't even realize what's going on. They're not fully conscious that what's driving them is just the desperate need for connection to others, and they seek that in a diverted, kind of perverted way through acquiring a sense of power so that others are forced to pay attention to them. But if you just for once face whatever problem it is, in this case, the lack of connection and the loneliness, you can overcome it most efficiently. So how do you do that? The same way that people have been doing it for thousands of years. You go alone and just sit with yourself, meditate, whatever. There are a lot of other spiritual practices you can do that go along with this. I discuss them in my book. There's a link to my book on my main channel webpage. It's free if you read the ebook online. Under spiritual practices. So then by following the basic spiritual practices, things like vegetarian diet for a while, fasting, meditation, but mostly just being alone in the wilderness with no distractions, facing your aloneness for once, you'll start to feel kind of a baseline connection. And I don't want to use religious terms, but kind of a baseline connection to a unified field of consciousness. And then you really, once you have that, you don't feel so alone. This was a basic practice in a lot of traditional cultures. We don't have it in our culture because we're fueled by this lack of connection. But once you have that, you don't have to spend quite so much effort to the degree that you have that connection, that feel that connection to others and to a unified field of consciousness. You don't feel this desperate need to run around forcing others to pay attention to you. And that saves you an enormous amount of time and trouble in life, I believe. That's really the most important point, which is why I put it first in this video. A second kind of vaguely related issue, which doesn't really get discussed nearly enough, in my opinion, is how do you live a decent life today? You constantly see people complaining, I don't have any money, I can't pay rent, I can't get by, I'm working all the time. And I always think, what would I do if I was a young person nowadays? I kind of squeaked by back when you could still get a job that paid enough that you could save money, and if you invested well, maybe if you were in the top 5%, you had a chance of getting ahead and retiring early with a lot of money or something. Nowadays, it's really even that much harder to get ahead, especially if you're working for other people. So you see a lot of the online advice that you have to start your own business and work really hard, and then you can make some money. And yes, there is a chance still, I suppose, for some people to get ahead if they work really hard. But it's harder than ever. And I think what gets overlooked, at least in the advice out there, a lot of people are doing this, but in the advice, what gets overlooked is that you can live a great life today, maybe a better life than in any other point in history, but you just have to be smart about it, and you need a lot of free time. Andrew Carnegie, in his autobiography, wrote that, and he was the richest man in the world when he wrote this, that it really takes almost nothing to live a better life than everyone else. You can eat better food than everyone else by just taking some time to prepare it well and search out good sources of ingredients. You can still travel where you want if you're really smart about it and you have time. It doesn't take a lot of money. You can see the most beautiful things in nature for free. You can read the best literature, watch the best entertainment almost for free. It's really a sense of taste and aesthetics and time and knowledge that's needed for all these things, not money so much. Certainly money's helpful, but people don't focus enough on obtaining free time. At least the advice out there doesn't discuss this enough, in my opinion. I think a lot of people are learning this. They're learning that, hey, I can have better food than most multimillionaires if I just learn how to prepare good food and learn where to get good ingredients. And I can have a more enjoyable entertainment than most millionaires who are busy working all the time if I just develop my sense of aesthetics and learn how to, which types of entertainment and which types of art are the best. It's this way in almost every field. If you just take a lot of focus and you try to learn about something, you can enjoy it a lot. It's really the time and the focus that are missing. You have access to an unimaginable amount of information today. You can learn how to do these things. It's really just time and focus. So I would say that all hope is not lost. I know it's extremely difficult to get by nowadays, but it's because everyone's competing in the same way. Peter Thiel talks about this in 0 to 1 or whatever his book was, that everyone's competing. And if you just step outside that competition, those very crowded lanes of competition, you can achieve a lot of things. I'm sorry I'm not doing a great job of explaining this, but I think you get the point. It's time that people need, not so much money. And it's focus that people need, not to win and to be the most successful in a particular field. Anyone can. I live in a neighborhood where everyone's very wealthy, and they're all eating crap. They're all watching bad TV. Half of them are busy all the time, not very happy. You can have much better than that, and it doesn't take a lot of money. Again, Andrew Carnegie's statement. Sorry I didn't do a good job of explaining that, but it's a really important point that I don't think any of these gurus and leaders discuss enough. Money isn't even 10% of what's going to get you high quality enjoyment in life. That's friends and also women. People always think they need money for women. You're basically, again, not my field of expertise at all, but my observation is that long-term relationships generally work between people who are very compatible. So whatever you make yourself into, you're probably going to meet other people like that, and you're probably going to form the most lasting relationships with other people who are similar to you. So just try to strive for a life that you're happy with and where you're content, and then you will hopefully meet other people that have a similar life. Whereas if you're just striving for money, especially if you're not ethical, you're going to be around other people who are striving for money and not ethical, and you're going to end up with probably constant frustration in relationships, which happens to a lot of rich people. I guess I kind of mangled that topic, but hopefully you get the point. Last topic, gone over in the past in parts, but it's so important. I want to just kind of try to cover everything right now. I'm going to do a bad job and probably mangle it again, but food and diet is really the most important thing for your enjoyment, other than perhaps feeling a connection to others. And to your success in life, to everything. And society doesn't really teach it. They tell you, go work really hard, work 60 hours a week, eat some takeout pizza or hamburgers, and when your body's ruined at age 35, we're just going to lay you off, and too bad. You see what the school system feeds people. This society isn't really set up to help you so much as to fuel society itself, and that's kind of understandable, I suppose. Anyway, if you want to have better health, which will give you a lot more enjoyment in life, and you'll have a lot less trouble, you'll perhaps even have a better mental state, diet is so important, and in sustainable traditional cultures, it's the main thing that you are taught. In our society, it's not taught at all. So it's really important to take it upon yourself to learn. And it's not money that people need to learn and eat a healthy diet. It's really just time and focus. One topic I've been meaning to cover now is the carnivore versus the vegan diet. There's a lot of discussion now about carnivore diet because originally people talked about vegan diet a lot because it was ethical, and those were the first people on the internet, and now there's a backlash where everybody goes to carnivore diet. And this is just a continuation of this thing that's been going on forever where people want a magic pill. Traditional societies, as I've said in so many videos for 20 years, traditional societies developed the diets that worked. Maybe they weren't absolutely optimal, maybe they were a little carb heavy because carbs were easier to come by, but generally traditional diets developed over thousands of years empirically, and they determined what works. I don't think a full carnivore diet is any more optimal than a full vegan diet. At least the vegan diets are ethical, and that's a whole nother field. And I do believe that whenever you pursue ethics in life, ultimately that pays off and is really important, but that's not so much what this video is about. However, to really improve your state of consciousness and connection with others, I do think you have to be ethical and pursue ethics as much as possible. So I'm not meaning to diminish the people that try to pursue vegan and vegetarian diets and more ethical diets. I think that's an incredible, one of the most important things you can do. However, I think traditional diets show that veganism is not optimal, and you are making a sacrifice, as you often do, make sacrifices for ethics. But we could all get by better in the short term, at least, if we had no ethics, but long term, I think things catch up with you. Again, this is a topic that I feel a little hypocritical talking about. I'm not an expert on diet. I'm not a great cook. It's just something that I've studied for decades and have gotten better at and observed many different diets around the world, tried many different diets myself. So hopefully I can also give a different perspective. I'll talk about some of the problems that I see people having, and from my study, it seems that people might have on both a vegan vegetarian diet and a carnivore diet, and why neither one were what traditional societies followed. On a vegan vegetarian diet, especially a vegan diet, there's no B12. And everyone now, I think, recognizes the importance of B12 and supplementing with that. There's also DHA and EPA, which are two omega-3 fatty acids that your body can form to some degree, but not form to an optimal degree, also depending on your genetics. It's used a lot in brain function. There's carnitine and carnosine, two semi-essential amino acids, which are formed from other amino acids, but again, not really formed in optimal levels. So you need those from meat, ideally. DHA and EPA, also B12, everyone knows, is only from animal sources. Then there's lesser known things like collagen and elastin, forms the connective tissue of your body. You look at many long-term vegans, they're having issues like carpal tunnel syndrome and things that perhaps could be leaky gut, things that could perhaps be greatly improved by more collagen and elastin in the diet. Elastin especially nobody talks about, and yet so many older people nowadays have aortic aneurysms and whatnot, possibly due to a lack of elastin, which again comes from the same kinds of sources as collagen, bone broth basically, and soup stock. Things that we don't eat much of anymore, like zinc, you certainly get from vegetables, but you might not get an optimal amount. These are some of the problems that tend to crop up for people long-term on the vegan diet. And of course, the more you study the vegan or vegetarian diet and the better you practice it, the less trouble you're going to have. The thing is, nowadays, everybody just thinks they can eat junk food and get by, especially on vegetarian and vegan diets that are kind of deficient to begin with. You really need to be careful and not eat any empty calories, not eat any junk food if you're going to try to get by on that, and probably supplement with certain things. And also, as noble as it is to try to eat a vegan diet, it's also really important, if you do eat some meat, to just get the meat from the most ethical sources possible. It's unbelievable what we do with factory farming in this country and much of the world now, and we just block it out, and it's really kind of unacceptable. We can afford meat that's more ethically raised, where the animal had a reasonably good life until it was killed, which is much like what happens in the wild. But to raise an animal in a factory farm is just horrendous, and to eat that kind of food in order to save a couple of dollars is not good for your health, but also just horrendously unethical. I understand everybody that eats meat occasionally has probably done this, but certainly something to be avoided, both for your health and for ethics. So then going to the carnivore diet, which is so popular now, you can run into problems with this too. That's why there aren't that many carnivore societies. There are a few that are forced to be, such as the Eskimos, but generally when people have the possibility of eating vegetable sources of food, they do so. In fact, one of the first scientific diet was an all-meat diet. Scientists discovered calories and that food had calories, and they decided, as they always do arrogantly, that we understand everything about food now, and all you have to do is eat the highest caloric foods, and that's the most scientific diet, so just eat a bunch of animal fat. Supposedly one of the kings of England died early, and many people died early from following this scientific diet. You're going to miss a lot of things on a carnivore diet. Antioxidants and fiber in food, extremely important. A lot of the food now, the factory farmed food, is high in toxins and prions. This is a really controversial topic. You can't talk about it too much because you get censored, but all traditional societies tended to know not to eat scavenger animals. No scientist can tell you why nowadays, but almost certainly that was because scavenger animals are taking in toxins in the rotted food they're eating. When food rots, the bacteria and the fungi produce toxins, often neurotoxins, in order to protect those sources of food from being eaten by larger animals. So when you eat rotten food, most likely you are accumulating neurotoxins and toxins from that food. Again, traditional societies always said, don't eat rotten food. And yet, most of the factory farmed food that we eat has slaughterhouse byproducts in it. We're effectively eating scavenger animals. Really important to avoid that. And if you eat ethically sourced food, you're not getting that unless you're eating a scavenger animal, which very few people do. And you just innately know this. You innately know, don't eat a rat, don't eat a vulture. You don't even need to be told this by traditional knowledge, and yet today that's what we're doing. When we eat pigs and chickens that are fed, a large percentage of their food is just rotten meat that comes from slaughterhouses. I think that issue is really the biggest one for most people on carnivore diet, because when you're eating so much meat, you can't necessarily afford to eat all ethically sourced meat. And to just eat a diet full of scavenger animals is probably going to impact you in various ways eventually, and maybe really severely. I could go onto this topic for a long time, but I think it's one reason that a lot of religious societies, in addition to the ethics, they focused on more vegetarian food because you're not getting so many of these neurotoxins. Your brain functions a little better in some ways, perhaps. That's not the only problem with carnivore diet, modern carnivore diet. Many animals have prion disease. Traditionally, you always cook lamb, and lamb is one of the main animals which is more susceptible to prion-based diseases. You also, in some societies, remove the nervous tissue from lamb. Today, even cattle have prion-based diseases. It's censored to even discuss it. However, almost certainly the epidemic of Creutzfeldt-Jacobs disease in America is actually just an epidemic of mad cow disease, and potentially even the epidemic of dementia and Alzheimer's. Not that any of this is ever going to be studied, because it's not really in anyone's interest to study it. Important, if you are eating a lot of meat, to get the meat from ethical sources, and also just for purely ethical reasons. I don't think we always see immediately how ethics pay off or how we suffer when we don't follow good ethics, but I think many people sense that you simply should follow good ethics whenever possible, and to be aware of where the meat is coming from. Just to wrap up, there are probably other things that you're missing on an all-meat diet or a mostly meat diet. Science hasn't discovered everything. We're only now discovering the importance of things like methylated sulfur, alpha-lipoic acid. These are things that you even lost pretty quickly with cooking, much less when you're eating all cooked meat. There are also various phytochemicals, some which are mild toxins, and your body may, and in fact has been proven in some cases, uses these mild toxins from plant sources to fight infection, and possibly even as a mild form of ongoing chemotherapy that's in the past stopped the epidemic of cancer that we have now. I could go on forever, but ultimately, I will repeat, traditional societies determined what works. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. It's interesting to study and try to understand scientifically, but I don't think science will ever fully understand it, and there's also no funding to truly study the epidemiology of natural diets. You just know that if you eat natural food, which you prepare yourself, and you take the time to learn how to prepare well yourself, you're going to probably do best, instead of just eating pre-prepared junk food, things that are full of unnatural types of oils and even unnatural proteins and toxins that we never had very much in our diet in the past. It takes a lifetime to learn how to source and prepare food as well as possible, and I'm not an expert, but it's an issue that gets overlooked when it should be maybe one of the main things we're thinking about. So that's the video. Sorry I mixed 3 different topics together. They kind of go together maybe in some ways. Those are 3 of the most important things to improve your life, and I've touched on them perhaps in various ways in other videos, but I wanted to get them all in one video and get this out there.